What up, everybody? It's Nick here, and I had the opportunity to interview a few of the filmmakers for the docuseries called The Forge of Friendship, J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. And yeah, they have given me permission to play the audio of the trailer for the docuseries, and we'll play the trailer and then we'll jump into the interview. So if you are not wanting to listen to the trailer, though, you can skip ahead about a minute and jump right into the interview. But until then, enjoy.
J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, soldiers, Oxford scholars, and the authors of epic tales that have inspired generations with their heroism and redemption. Although their most surprising tale is yet to be revealed.
Friendship between Lewis and Tolkien is truly one of the great masterpieces of all time. And one of the things that I love best about that friendship is how really different they were.
What is beautiful about Lewis's understanding of friendship is how inclusive it is. It doesn't erect these artificial barriers between people. You disagree on these issues, I cannot be your friend. Lewis and Tolkien would scoff at that.
That's the friendship that allowed them to survive the Great War. It's the friendship of ideas that lead to the books for which we remember both Lewis and Tolkien.
In this documentary series, we will journey through the lives of Tolkien and Lewis, overcoming the tragedies of the 20th century and into the Forge of Friendship.
What up, Tolkien Poppers? It's Nick here with another episode of the podcast, and I'm excited because I get to bring together the realms of pop culture and Tolkien scholarship together in a way that I think is really fun, and it's through a docuseries that is in the works. It is upcoming. It is anticipated. And it is a docuseries called The Forge of Friendship, J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. And it is made by some filmmakers and some creatives at Eastgate Creative, which is a nonprofit. And I got to interview 3 of the 5 members of the docuseries team: Kirk Manton, Jock Petersen, and Ralph Linhardt. And Ralph Linhardt, he had a doctor's appointment. He came in late, so he's kind of in and out. He's a champ for sticking it out in that way. But the other members of the team, I wanted to give them credit, but they were not able to join us, is Joshua McLemore and Gina Doss. So I got to have a majority of them, which was pretty exciting. But in the episode, we are going to talk about the upcoming docuseries, about J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis's lives and how they converge. We talk about how I met these dudes in Nashville and just some more fun stuff, and then some of the themes and their own experiences. And we get to talk about some of the scholars that are included in this docuseries. And you listened to the trailer before this, and it was just a portion of the trailer, and I'll have it linked in the show notes, but it's going to be incredible. You just have to listen to see what's going on there. But a little bit of housekeeping. I made a couple mistakes here in the episode. ADHD problems. I called the docuseries a bunch of different things: Forged in Friendship, Forged of the Friendship, or something. But it is the Forge of Friendship. Okay, that is what it's called. And it is not. It's not a film. It is a series. It is a 5-part series, and throughout the interview, I call it a film. So correct that. Also, we talk about Diana Glyer a couple times, and I accidentally call her Diane. So Diana, if you're listening to this, I apologize. I know that your name's Diana, but in the moment of interviewing, I called you Diane. So those are some things I made a mistake for, and that's that. So enjoy my talk with members of the Forge of Friendship film crew, and check out the links. Get excited. I think that you'll enjoy this conversation. Peace. What up, Tolkien Poppers? It is Nick here, and I'm joined by some just some cool guys here. I've got a Jock Petersen and Kirk Manton. And if you're like, Nick, I've listened to your show, I've read your stuff, and who are these guys? Just know that you're in for a treat, because these guys are two of the three filmmakers behind the documentary Forged in Friendship. And it's a Tolkien podcast, so I wouldn't have them on if it wasn't about Tolkien. And guess what? The documentary is about Tolkien and bonus treat C.S. Lewis. So I'm excited to have you guys on, Jock and Kirk. How are you guys doing? Thanks for coming on.
Doing good. Thank you for having us.
It is great to be here, and it was fun to meet you in Nashville when we had a chance.
That's right. Yeah, so for everyone, how Kirk, Jock, and Ralph, who's the other filmmaker who is unable to be with us today, my alma mater, Trevecca University in Nashville, hosted you guys. I saw that it was a free event and went. Saw your contact information, Kirk, and I was like, I gotta meet these guys. I gotta spread the word, because it was the best. I mean, I only got to see an hour of the documentary, but it was the best documentary on C.S. Lewis and Tolkien I'd ever seen. And so then you guys were cool enough to invite me over to the house you were staying at, and got to hang out with you guys at the Rabbit Room, and then have just kind of talked a little bit ever since.
Yeah,
Great weekend.
Yes, we've been on tour, not with the full documentary, because that's 5 episodes, like 5 hours, but we're doing a 1 hour preview of selected scenes from each of the episodes. And we were at Trevecca with the film students there, and Nick, you were able to join, and then we were in the Rabbit Room. So we were at Lipscomb and some other universities there in the Nashville area, so it was a blast. And hanging out with you was certainly one of the highlights of it.
Oh, well, thanks. I mean,
Definitely.
It was fun. And I guess too, because you were talking about going to these universities and stuff, and we were talking before about Ireland, and you guys going to a conference in Belfast. And so, where have you been on the tour? Like, where did it start, and where are you guys right now, I guess, in the process there?
Yeah, I would say we're about a third to halfway done, Kirk.
Yeah, we're
yeah.
2 months in, 16 colleges down, over 1,000 students, and we're breaking it up into geographic areas. So we did the Midwest, the Great Plains, and the Nashville area, and then we did a one-off up in Oregon last week.
And then we probably have another 2025 to go.
Oh, it's going to be a blast. Geographically, we'll be after Easter, right after Easter, we'll be in California for a week, Southern California. And then about 2 weeks later, we try and give each other about a week off in between, to case go down and say hi to our families. But then we'll be in the Texas area. And then during the summer, we've got a lot of the colleges are, not doing anything. So we're testing the waters with some other special events in some areas, possibility of some Comic-Con action. We've got some conferences. Even Jock doesn't know about some of these things. I'm still just knocking on the door. So we've got some conference things in the summer, and then in the fall, we'll look at some of the the southeast area in North Carolina area, and some other places. So people need to keep following us to see when we're going to be in their area. And we're setting it up so that we have public events as much as possible, maybe focused at a college, and we'll be in some classrooms, but we really encourage the college to do a public event that other people can come to. So they follow us, they'll find out where we are, and they can certainly come and see and enjoy it like you did.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So yeah, everyone, I mean, there'll be links to your social media and websites and things. So, everyone who's in California and Texas, keep an eye out. And then everyone who is just interested in going to a preview and maybe meeting Kirk and Jock and Ralph, wait for their updates, because even just the preview is just worth the price of admission alone. It sounds like it's free just to see it.
Yeah, it's certainly worth the price of free.
Yeah, a little more than that, I'd say. Okay. At least the preview.
That's right. You'll have bragging rights when you're done.
That's right. I just think about too, like the college tour gives me kind of how rock bands used to do college tours back in the day. I feel like it's not really a thing anymore, except for a few choice universities. But, I think you guys are a little bit of, rock star status when it comes to C.S. Lewis, Tolkien type stuff. So, yeah.
Well, yeah, part of the deal is to get the word out and share it with everybody. So that's what we're working on.
Heck yeah, and hopefully this will be a good part of it. But yeah, so obviously it's about C.S. Lewis and Tolkien's friendship, what the documentary is about. But for what I do with everyone who comes on the show is that everyone's story about how they come to Lewis or Tolkien is, unique, but also always has something that is shared between people. It resonates with people's experiences as well. So for you guys, could you give us like a brief account of how maybe each of you encountered Lewis and or Tolkien, and how those encounters continue to influence the trajectory of your lives? And I've got the order of the screen here, so we'll get Jock first, and then Kirk, you'll take us home.
Go for it.
All right. Well, one of the things about the documentary is the story and the lives of Lewis and Tolkien are told by the renowned scholars in the field, and that's one of the things that was kind of a bit shocking for me, was that my discovery of Lewis and Tolkien was actually like in fourth grade, when a bunch of geek friends and myself would just pick book series to kind of plow through. And of course, Lord of the Rings and Chronicles of Narnia were two of those series that we went through. And so I experienced them as the kids' books that we thought they were. And then later on with this documentary and going through and realizing that these scholars have devoted their lives to small aspects of each of their lives was just fascinating in terms of the breadth and the expanse of what they've done and how they've affected the world. That it's been interesting to have that sort of reflection. Which is why one of the things for me that I don't want to discount is how so many people come about Lewis and Tolkien, and be able to have the documentary also address that value of absorbing it as a child and the value of that childlike reflection on their works.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. And for those who are interested in some of the more intellectual aspects of Tolkien and Lewis, Kirk and Jock really have gotten some just world-class scholars in this documentary. There's John Garth, Diane Glyer, Serena Higgins, and just loads more. And just, I hadn't really even thought about starting off with the childhood and talking about those sort of enchanting experiences that they had as children, and kind of using that to connect to audiences. So I love that. And also too, little piece of detail, Jock was talking about nerding out with his friends when he was a kid. This dude read Dune in elementary school. So, Jock is a super nerd. So.
Not saying I understood it all, but we read it.
and isn't that kind of the measure of a work that goes beyond the normal, that multiple generations can enjoy it, and that it can be enjoyed at multiple stages of your life?
Yeah.
Lewis, I believe it's in the introduction to Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, as he writes to the person he dedicates it to, says about someday you'll be old enough to pick it up again and enjoy it at that next, in a sense, at that next level. That's what that takes any work to me to another level.
That's awesome. And so Kirk, did you tell us about your, first encounter with Lewis and or Tolkien?
Yeah. And the more that I've thought about it, I think probably my first encounter was Tolkien. And this was in 1975, way, way back in time. 1975, I believe. I was on a choir tour as a 15-year-old, and I was in Europe for the first time. I was in England, went to talk about the perfect setting. I'm in Victoria train station, and there on the turnstile was a single paperback volume of The Lord of the Rings. And so I grabbed it, I purchased that, and consistently for the next however many days, I read through that thing. Even on the tour, I'm just sitting here in the midst of England and Switzerland or what, and I'm reading through Lord of the Rings. So I remember that vividly, and I wish that it hadn't been paperback. I wish it would have survived, but it fell apart over time for sure. And then my encounter with Lewis, I don't remember specifically first reading Chronicles of Narnia. What I remember was my junior year in high school. I had become a Christian early in life, and when I get into my junior high years, you start becoming aware of other worldviews, and that there are brilliant people who have other worldviews. And having come to my worldview early, I got to the place where I was a little nervous and thinking, maybe I'm on the wrong team. Maybe I chose too early because there are other, and so somehow at that point, I ended up reading Mere Christianity, or really, I think the best one was Surprised by Joy, Lewis's story of his life, of his growing up, and eventually his heavy, heavy atheism, really strong atheism through his most formative years of education and logic and philosophy and learning, and then eventually coming up to his adulthood, where he really wrestled through, with the help of Tolkien, which is something I'm sure we'll talk about, that he came back to a faith that was really strong in Christianity. And it wasn't that he answered all my questions at that point. It's just that it was like having a big brother who had been there on the other side, on the other worldviews, and really wrestled them down, and really came to the place where he anchored in Christianity. And so for me, that just gave me some assurance that, hey, I can work through all of this and really dive in, and I'm not on shaky ground, and I can see my foundation firm up because I know that others have been there and gone through and really thought it through. And Lewis was an incredible logic thinker, and that helped me during that time, got me through that difficult time in junior high, coming into high school.
Oh man, thanks both for sharing. I love all of that, and of course, a lot of things resonate with me, where particularly around the creating communities when you're young with people with shared interests, and then also the faith aspect too, which we'll get into a little later, that there is, you do highlight on C.S. Lewis's and Tolkien's faith in the film without making it only about that, in a way that I think is masterfully done. But I know for me as a Christian as well, about where Tolkien was kind of that grounding author and personality for me in times, and in my specifically my undergrad years, where you're wrestling with those things that you were talking about, other people with ideas. Do I believe in this stuff? What have I been right or wrong about all these things? And then, of course, learning about Tolkien and C.S. Lewis's relationship, and to the point where you see someone like Lewis, who I read before Tolkien ever as a kid. I went to a Christian school, and learned about C.S. Lewis and all of his stuff. And then you find out that Tolkien was a huge aspect, or a contributing factor and friend that led to C.S. Lewis's conversion. And it's funny, I'll talk to friends who know I'm a big Tolkien nerd, and I can be a little allergic to more cultural Christian stuff. There's things that I'm working on, but people are always surprised. They're like, I thought you would hate C.S. Lewis. And I'm like, how would I hate C.S. Lewis? That I always get surprised when people think that. And they're like, well, you like Tolkien. That's their answer. And I'm like, I just want to let you know that if it wasn't for Tolkien, C.S. Lewis wouldn't be a Christian. So that there you go, you know.
Yeah.
But
Why should I hate Lewis if my guy I liked Lewis? There's got to be something in there that he liked.
right, right.
That's right.
And I think one of the things that I think that this film will do would hopefully encourage people to, whether they're one side, maybe a little more Tolkien heavy or Lewis heavy, that it'll encourage people to kind of explore deeper into their lives and their works, to see how they really do complement and need each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that
so
was sort of the, one of the big discoveries for me early on is like, I went from, the first readings of these guys at a young age, and then it wasn't until, a handful of years ago that I even discovered that they knew each other, let alone had this whole relationship. And it's like, how did that? I mean, it's seeming more in the, and maybe it's because the realm that we're in, but it's seeming more in the general zeitgeist of understanding now. But it's like, how did that many years go on and it never became a factor? It never became a topic of discussion, because it is so, their lives are so affected by one another, and it's just amazing to me that it never made its way in, into pop culture enough to.
Well, you wonder how much of it, in a sense, is a natural marketing phenomenon, that the people who publish someone, they want to show them as lone wolf heroes.
Yeah.
That, that they're seminal individuals who create this wonderful thing, where, Jock, you and I have been discovering with that there are other pairings of authors that were friends, that undoubtedly influenced each other, but it's not talked about, because partially maybe because that, they want to sell their books, whoever is promoting and marketing, so they keep that focus on the individual.
Yeah.
But it isn't the reality of how creative expression happens and how maturity occurs and good work is created. And Diane Glyer is, the books that she put out with Bandersnatch and the company we keep, showing that in reality, it's creative within community of groups that really get the best out of ourselves.
Yeah, yeah. And that's kind of a tragedy, because you get people that have a creative bug, right? And they feel like it has to be the auteur theory and they have to do it all, and then they get to hard parts or challenging parts or whatever and wind up squashing it within their own, within their own heads. And if it was promoted more as the reality that, hey, it does take friends and it does take other people to help you even define what you're thinking, it would probably be a very different, the outcome of things, I think, would be a lot more plentiful.
And it's not just gathering around you people who agree with you, and and encourage you in your, you're brilliant, you're brilliant, you're brilliant. Lewis and Tolkien said, no, you need to work on this part over here. Go ahead.
I was going to say, we don't want to jump the gun on your questioning, but we may very well get to the point that to what Kirk mentions, the idea, it's not about having like-minded people. It's about having friends that challenge you, not just in execution, but in thought itself, where you do butt heads and you do battle certain things and you do have hard challenges, but the perseverance of that is what creates brilliant outcomes.
And that's what we find in Lewis and Tolkien.
Yeah. And in today's world, I think that's even more challenging. And honestly, I think Kirk would agree, we wouldn't have the works of Lewis and Tolkien in the way that we have them today had they not had this amazing friction-based relationship.
I think,
That's
you
what
know,
they
and I
said.
even think about the you know, because you do bring in the dynamics of the Inklings in the movie without making it like the entire focus. Um, but I'm gonna let Ralph in here. So for all my listeners, we talked about Ralph not being here and we were sad, but now Ralph is here and we are no longer
Woohoo!
sad. And so you hear that woohoo? That is Ralph Linhardt. Ralph, say hi to everyone. Introduce yourself. Give us a little.
Yes, hello, I'm Ralph. I'm the other director with Jock and cinematographer on The Forge of Friendship.
Fantastic. And Ralph, what we were doing was we were just talking about Tolkien and Lewis's friendship and how they are necessary in their creative processes, where they weren't lone rangers, you know, creating these works of genius by themselves, you know, but they had friendships and relationships, and without their friendships and relationships, particularly with one another, we wouldn't have Lord of the Rings. We wouldn't have, you know, Chronicles of Narnia and The Great Divorce and the Space Trilogy, you know. But yeah, I don't know if you have any input on that, or if you know.
Well, it sounds like you've been watching our film. So it sounds like you've been watching our film. That's certainly what we've discovered is not only their friendship, but a kind of friendship that we're not seeing anymore in culture now, and definitely needs to be recaptured. One of not only consistency of seeing each other, but also a level of acceptance of conflict that people now don't seem to think is necessary, or means that, well, that must mean you're the wrong friend. If we don't agree on everything, if we see things differently, then I've got to get away from you because you'll poison me from what is right. And we've seen, not only through our own friendships, but certainly through their works, that without that conflict, you're blinded to your worst weaknesses. You know, Tolkien was blinded to his detail being not all that interesting to everybody else. To him, his endless detail of, you know, every little detail of Middle Earth and the languages and all that stuff was the big fun for him, is what we learned from the scholars, and it got in the way of the story. But when Lewis kind of said, "Gosh, I kind of like it when the hobbits go somewhere and they do things," he was like, "Oh, you like that?" That's what Diana Glyer told us, is that it was easy for him to make the adjustment. He just didn't see that. Gosh, you mean you don't like 50 pages about what the dirt's like? You know, so that was a clear example of not even a conflict, but just being blindsided by something Tolkien didn't realize was uninteresting to maybe everybody else. And the story became better because of it. And certainly Diana makes that great case in Bandersnatch, her wonderful book on the subject.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love your input, and I love too, because I think about the Inklings and how all of those people who were in that group influenced Tolkien and Lewis, and of course one another, and all of them had differing perspectives, where they had friction as well as shared beliefs and interests as well.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
encouragement and support. I mean, it's not that it was all conflict,
Right.
but we kind of focus on that because it's so rare to have any or allow any. But they also had deep common love for things that held them together and kept them moving and made it possible for those areas where they did have differences to be instructive rather than destructive.
oh, go ahead, Ralph.
Oh, I was just going to say, you know, Crystal Hurd, she's one of our scholars who studied Lewis's time in Belfast really extensively. It's kind of her area. She really laid out to us something that seemed quite applicable to now. It was really the fundamental difference in a Northern Irish Belfast Protestant and a Catholic. I mean, that makes Trump and Biden look like buddies. Uh, that Tolkien and Lewis came to their relationship with that overtone. That, as she says, and many others have said, Lewis was raised by a grandfather who, from the pulpit, preached anti-Catholicism and was actively participating in the Belfast oppression, so to speak, of uh, of Catholics. And even though Lewis's mother, Flora, tried to inoculate him and Warney against that, he carried that with him. How could he not? And she really, Crystal Hurd, that is, really brought that perspective out, sort of from us kind of seeing this political divide we have now, that, how could you work with a Biden supporter, or the other way around, or how could you work with a Trump supporter, type of thing. Well, they they overcame that political divide by their love of mythology and their love for all the great stories. But they had to overcome it, and it was certainly there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of people who don't know the biography, or people who have only read Carpenter's biography or something like that, you learn about the prejudice that both Tolkien and Lewis brought to the table as far as the religious aspect went there, and like you said, the overcoming of that. So I guess, and how that led to their friendship and creative thriving. But I focused more on Tolkien more than Lewis, and you guys have already, kind of planted the seeds of like, okay, here's where Lewis came from, here's some of his anti-Catholic background. But for those of my listeners and other people who aren't as familiar with Lewis's life, like, could you give us more details about like his life, maybe his childhood or younger years or wherever, that you think are like essential elements if you're going to understand their relationship and creative process?
Well,
Go ahead, Chris.
Ralph. Okay, I'll start out in the beginning. Born in Belfast as a child, Diana brings out the big tragedy of his life. His mother dies. Not just dies, but she's operated on for cancer in their dining room. And so that, as a young boy, I think if you guys maybe 8 or 9 years old, at that point, he has nothing to do with God anymore. It's, he prayed that she would be healed or whatever, and she dies. And so from that point, he moves into the long season of his life where he's not believing that God exists. And then he comes into, and somebody can pick it up at, let's say, World War I.
Well, I think it's good to state too that again, we are not the scholars; we are the documentarians,
Absolutely.
and so don't look to us for the authority on this. It's those that we interview that give us this information. We just sort of regurgitate it. So
That's right. As Lewis says, we're just scholars' parrots. And we don't even speak Greek. So.
Yes. The other little element of that childhood was that his family instilled in him a love for reading and learning.
Yes.
Tons of that. This guy was studying Greek and Latin basically in elementary school, and reading all the time. So.
Yeah, and Tolkien has that. They share that sort of unrealistic childhood reading ability. Both of them do, because Father Francis, in the case of Tolkien, he introduced Tolkien to things that most boys would not be reading at his age, because he was a linguist. Father Francis was a linguist, and so his Catholicism was restrictive at that time because Father Francis wouldn't let him do a lot of things. He was really, at that point, Tolkien is completely he's an orphan. His dad dies in South Africa, early on, and then his mom dies suddenly from, I think it's a lung thing. I don't remember. We'd have to ask John Garth, who's knows and sees all. And anyone who wants to know anything about Tolkien, if you're not reading John Garth, you're not reading anybody. And it's so they both have that shared experience. I don't know from any of our scholars anyone who's talked about whether they ever discussed that, or whether it
Yeah,
was
that's
beyond, whether
that's
it
a
was
good.
the sorry, Jock, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm just agreeing
Yeah,
to his key
it'd be
point.
interesting to know if that was just like much like the war, which was kind of an unsaid thing. It's like all you have to do is say, "Hey, Passchendaele or the Somme," and anybody in the World War I would immediately know what you're talking about and not need to talk much more about it. Maybe
And
that
this is
same experience of losing their mothers, was something they connected on and was part of their relationship that they could comfort each other over. I don't know.
So
Love to
this
hear a
is where it's
scholar talk about that.
challenging. This is where it's challenging as documentarians, right? Is that there's things that there's things that you hear that you're just sort of forced to visualize in your mind, right? And obviously we have to create some visuals for this as well. But the idea that they both, lost parents at a very early age and very affecting age, they both were given exposure to, in a sense, hide in literature, hide in books, and hide in learning, or at least exist there some degree of isolation.
Learn the healing and coping that could bring during a
Exactly.
time. Yeah.
Exactly. And then both experiencing the horrors of World War One. And coming back to England at this time when, a large percentage of the population, the male population especially was eradicated. And they come back to now try and rebuild this country of England. And so it's hard to believe that at least those discussions didn't come up somehow. They had to have commiserated, I believe, on
Sure.
these topics. There's not a lot of necessarily, like Ralph's saying, a lot of writings that describe it, but it's just hard to believe that they wouldn't have at least leaned on each other, knowing that those type of things never repair themselves. They're always a part of you.
So you got the World War One experience of both of them separate, and then you have Lewis coming back to Oxford and them meeting and them getting on with their careers and doing their work in their different schools that they're close to, and then highlight for Lewis especially, coming out of that relationship, you have the experience of this dichotomy of, as Lewis put it, everything I came to believe about the universe is materialism, atheist materialism. Everything that I believed to be true left me dry and unfulfilled. And that which I didn't believe was true was the very thing that was bringing me joy and meaning in my life, which was the mythology and the stories and the ancient texts that Lewis and Tolkien they were in. And as part of that relationship and discussing that, Tolkien brought out, maybe it's possible that while you're being affected by this mythology so much is that it's making you aware of something beyond the natural, something beyond the material, and the possibility that it really happened once. And it really could be true. And that just because there are lots of stories in mythology that are similar, doesn't mean that all of them are not true. They all are, they resonate in you and they're communicating a truth that you find meaning and the most significant and joyful part of your life. And they may be pointing to the fact that there is something beyond this life, beyond the materialism, and that mythology could be those are pointing to one that really happened. And so that's what we see as another huge milestone in Lewis's life. And that was because of a conversation with Tolkien, brought to a forefront with Tolkien and Dyson on Addison's Walk when we bring that out in the documentary.
Man, their lives were obviously different in many ways, but
Mm-hmm.
it's weird that there's big beats like throughout their lives really line up. The tragic loss of a parent really early on in life, right? And even Tolkien, there, I think Holly Ordway talks a little bit about this about and I can't remember what other scholar, but they talk about the sort of crisis of faith that even Tolkien
Mm-hmm.
has. That eventually, obviously, it kind of grows over time, and he kind of stays fast, and stays within his Catholic faith. But then, of course, World War One, losing friends, in the war, in combat, and then, of course, the academic side of things, and then both being at Oxford, right? And then, and like you were talking about, that huge moment of Lewis's conversion being just another intense human experience that can be shared between Tolkien and Lewis yet again, where, like you said, we don't have a lot of documentation, or at least documentation available to us, about Tolkien and Lewis discussing the loss of a parent, or combat stuff, or even further into detail about their faith. But like you're talking about, they had to have talked about it, right? I mean, we can't say for sure, but it feels like they would, right? Yeah.
So all those connections that you mentioned, I think the one that's missing is beer.
Oh,
yeah,
100%.
absolutely.
Tobacco as well.
Good beer, tobacco. Yeah.
That was things that definitely brought them together.
Yeah. Back when it wasn't bad for you,
Right, exactly.
Must have been the fun times.
You had to smoke Camel and filters if you wanted to, keep the sickness away,
to get the fresh.
That's right. I'm just thinking about, too, you guys, and you talk about these creative elements and these shared experiences, frictions, love, all these things that come together with real, deep, meaningful friendships. And then, of course, add creative collaboration, and it just adds another layer to that whole process. But for you guys, because obviously this film wasn't just a one-person project, but y'all have worked together, and then, of course, with the scholars and other people involved, like how I see a reflection between what you guys are doing and your acknowledgement of the creative process, and the way that the Inklings, in particular C.S. Lewis and Tolkien, went through their creative processes. So when I say that, like, tell us a little bit more about how you work together, work through those things, to bring this film about. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's certainly hard to work on this story and not have it become self-reflexive. You realize the importance of that opinion, thoughts, experiences, and sharing, and guidance and everything else. But I would say the one thing that's a bit different on this is that this is a collaboration. We are all working on the same thing. In their situation, they helped each other work on their individual pieces. So I don't want to, try and sort of make it like we're, modeling or doing what they did, but we are, and consciously modeling their relationships and modeling the value of those relationships. And as Ralph pointed out earlier, is the idea of like forcing yourselves to get together and forcing yourselves to do things on a repeated basis. And that was one of the things I think that with the Inkling meetings, I forget, every Tuesday or every Thursday or whatever it was, but
Tuesday and Thursday.
There you go. That's why.
Yeah.
But it's like they were dependent on each other to to do that in order to help each other through their works, and that's a valuable commitment.
And I think it would reflect in us that we're committed to allowing each other to speak into our areas of expertise. So Jock is heavy directing side, Ralph is cinematography side. We at times will come together and really review areas that we've done or storyline. And we don't say, Jock doesn't turn to me and say, well, your opinion really doesn't matter because you're not a director. We assume that the other sees things that we may not see, very possible, and are very open to that benefiting us.
Yeah, I guess there is a certain difference between working on a single project and coming together to kind of give input on, the individual things that you're doing. But man, I love the approach you guys take for each other. And I think too, highlighting the aspects of, which is just really hard to do right now, of saying, here are all the differences that people have and the love that is still experienced within those differences. And even the frustrations, even if we're talking about something as, it's not shallow because creativity isn't shallow, but you guys are talking about the differences between approaching the creative process rather than like, who did you vote for, in the last election, right?
Yeah.
But I think,
well, we get into those talks too, but
sure, as friends do. But I think even in the creative processes, the way that you work with friends on those levels and can get through the frustration probably reflects how you can get through the deeper stuff too.
Yeah, and I say that we're working on this as a collaboration, but that also doesn't mean that we don't have our individual projects. I mean, I've got a couple of screenplays that I've been working on, and Ralph continually, badgers me on making sure that I'm, moving that along. Kirk is a published author as well and has books that he's done. And so, there are other things that we encourage each other on still. So
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. It feels very much like a little bit of Led Zeppelin going on right now. Little Robert Plant, a little Jimmy Page, a little.
That's a little elevated for us, I might say.
Yeah, and Jock would understand that, and that's way over my head.
Okay, well,
that's another side of our life. What do we have in the music realm? Nick, one thing that you might edit back into the other segment about Lewis's journey and timeline of his life. I think you look at World War II and beyond that. So you have that conversion time, you have that significant in their 30s, 40s. And then you move into a time which our documentary, I think, is going to be bringing more out to people. There is the controversy about how did their relationship progress towards the end. Mm-hmm. And so just like Holly Ordway puts an axe to the root of, did Tolkien hated Narnia? Not really. And we're bringing a lot of this new perspective on things out because of the scholars that are bringing it to us, and we allow contradiction to live there, and we don't have a specific theme that we're sticking to and leaving things out so we can prove our point. Their relationship as a natural path of Tolkien becoming a family man, having 4 kids, Lewis being a bachelor for so long until he marries Joy late in life. There's a natural time of transition within their relationship of a little bit more distancing. And that's a reality about friendships too.
Yeah.
Right. Go ahead.
Those, Lewis going off to Cambridge and the separate geographical separations and, and time constraints. And yeah, people do have lives.
And how do relationships not end, but adjust and still be significant? And we see at the end of his life, Tolkien still coming to visit Lewis at the kilns at his house. And then Tolkien's descriptions of how Lewis's death affected him for those last 10 years of Tolkien's life. And so there's kind of filling in those bullet points along. Certainly, there's a lot to Lewis's life, a lot to Tolkien's, and where they touch together throughout is fantastic.
Yeah, and I think one of the things worth noting too is, and I don't have the quote by any means, but when Tolkien shared Lord of the Rings with, or some writing of Middle Earth with Lewis, kind of one of the first ones, and he was assumably very skeptical and very nervous about sharing and the vulnerability that that brought on. Lewis basically wrote back this, wonderful review saying, loved it, fantastic, I want more. And then he added, criticism to follow, right? Which it kind of illustrates that nuance and humor, but also the nuance of the relationship. Maybe he was attentive to Tolkien's vulnerability and wanted to soften the blow, or wanted to, like, set it right to where it's like, look, this is great, it's wonderful, but we also have to talk about the specifics, and we'll get to that when you're ready, but I want you to know that it's great, and that type of subtlety, or like I say, nuance with the relationship, I think is really a valuable point. And to Kirk's point of what happened towards the end, it's really, and Holly sort of clears it up, because I think the impression was that they fell out and things were bad at the end. And like I say, with Holly's sharing with us, is that that's not right. That's not the way it was, and there was a strong friendship up until the end.
Hmm. I think, and I think this actually flows really well with talking about those specific aspects of the end of both of their lives, and sort of this, life taking you towards different paths, and not necessarily in a negative way, but just in different life circumstances. Especially, I just think about what you guys do with the scholars, and I think will be such a cool thing for viewers of this film who don't want to do the hardcore academic research, but can have access to the amazing work that all of these people have done, including what you guys have done too with bringing about this in the film. I think that the focus away from other things and into friendship, and even revealing things like this about Tolkien and C.S. Lewis's life, to take away some of the folklore, or the myths, the bad myths, the fake stories of them having a fallout. And this is what they call a smooth transition in the podcast biz. But I think that Kirk gave a little karate move there. But
go
mostly,
Nick, go Nick, go.
I've dabbled in the crane. I've waxed on and waxed off. But I think the focus there is super important, and I know that we have talked, and I've heard you guys talk about how originally the film was going to be more World War One focused,
Right.
And now it's their friendship. So could you tell us a little bit how that transitioned into the friendship away from the World War One process?
Sure. I mean, we had, when things started out, we were originally trying to get to the anniversary of World War One and time it with that, and we sort of we fell short a bit on that timing, for a number of things. We had gone to England for 2 trips to interview the scholars and got some great stuff and great footage, but ultimately kind of realized that it was more than just a Tolkien Lewis World War One type of story, because there was this other, and we sort of approached it where that was the tripod, right? Is that World War One, Tolkien and Lewis was what held up the whole story. And we realized, well, there was so much more beyond World War One, obviously including World War Two and their works and their popularity and everything else, that it wasn't that wasn't the tripod. And then what we quickly realized was that actually the friendship between them is what was that third leg that was holding it up. And that was the strength that made the whole thing stand. And so then, of course, COVID came and slowed us down quite a bit. But in that process, we were able to redirect and create the series that we have now, which is The Forge of Friendship.
The historic experiences that any friendship lives within becomes raw material, but it's the friendship itself and how you deal with that and how those experiences are coming into that friendship and moving forward is a bigger picture. And if we're going to do the scope of their whole life, that's the picture.
I think I'm back. Am I back, guys?
You're back, Ralph.
You're back.
We were talking about the transition from focusing on World War I to the friendship aspect there.
Well, I think I got most of what Jock was saying, which was, the world changed. I mean, ultimately, World War I was, there was a perfect storm for us to get this project started in 2017. I don't know if you talked about this, Kirk, but our involvement with the C.S. Lewis Foundation, 2017 was the year of their major event every 3 years. So, and because of our relationship with the foundation over so many years, we knew so many scholars that we knew would be at that event. It was like 8 of them.
Ralph, let's tell them what the relationship Ralph's referring to is. Ralph and I, especially in the Jock over time, we volunteer with the C.S. Lewis Foundation to help them with their conferences in their technical area, help them capturing their content with our video skills and audio and all that. That part of our life we help them. So we've done that for over 30 years. And so these scholars have become friends of ours as we have served them.
These events are pretty phenomenal, sizable events that bring people from all over to Oxford and Cambridge generally.
Yeah. And Kirk and I, and to a lesser degree Jock, because he hadn't been to as many of them, but we'd all spent time with these scholars and got to know them as people and as friends. And so when the war was on, and when Diana's book actually came out about that same time, Bandersnatch, there was a lot of interest in their friendship, and obviously everything was World War I at that time. And we, as marketers, went, okay, everybody likes World War I. Did you know that they were both in World War I? And did you know they were friends? That was sort of the hook that we started the film with. And then we said, oh, and by the way, we get to be in Oxford, and 8 or 10 of our favorite scholars are going to be there, and we don't have any money yet, but we can interview all them and get something going. So that's how the whole project got started. And then, as it moved forward, as Jock was I think I caught him saying in the end, when COVID came and hit, the emphasis on World War I had kind of run its course. By the time 1917 had won the Academy Award, and everything was, World War I was really kind of becoming less of the zeitgeist. Certainly by 22, nobody cared about World War I anymore. And fortunately for us, what we did during that gap is we kept interviewing scholars, and the story expanded. And the couple of scholars who had emphasized World War I were then surrounded by other scholars saying, well, yes, World War I is important, but it's not really the whole story. And the weight of the other scholars into that, their love of mythology and their love of story and their love of the classic myths of King Arthur and all that stuff and them wanting to recreate a mythology for England after the tragedy of the World War I was really what motivated them more than sort of trying to process World War I through their works.
The one thing they together basically said to each other is, And the reality, if you look at the history of the writing that's coming out of World War One, it's depressing.
Mm-hmm.
It is defeatist. And they said, we can't find stuff being written that we want to read, this heroic good stuff, because we have a different view of the world. And so we're going to have to write it ourselves. And that's what they and the Inklings, you see a big difference. And what has survived, what has thrived, is we want to tell that story, how the relationship affected that.
And I think too, a lot of my listeners they get down with the nerdiness. Like they buy the academic books and they get into it. So like, you know, we've mentioned some just awesome ones, and you know, we gotta tease them a little bit. You can't reveal all of them, but you know, I saw Michael Christensen on there, Janet Brent Croft, just kind of, you know, Charlie Starr, some sort of legends there.
Good old Malcolm Guite.
Oh yeah, Malcolm
absolutely.
Guite, of course.
Simon Horben.
Yep. You know,
yeah.
So like, how many scholars did you guys like gather and interview for this project?
41 and counting.
By the time we're done, we'll be pushing 45.
Yeah. Yeah, we have a couple we call them cleanup hitters. You know, there are cleanup hitters because we know they know so much that at some point we're going to have little holes in the stories where Jock and I and Kirk will go, how do we get from here to there? Oh, let's call them. They'll know what to say. And so we're kind of saving them for sort of those bridges that we need to complete the story. You know, did you guys talk about, you know, I know his emphasis on Tolkien. I think it bears reminding that Lewis and Tolkien, you know, Lewis doesn't invite him to his wedding, for God's sakes. Did you guys talk about that?
Yeah, we talked about that season of their life where out of natural transitions, Tolkien the family man, Lewis the bachelor, these things, it wasn't a breaking of the relationship. It was, and this happens in friendships and about the coming back.
Right. Well, I was going to talk, kind of remind more of, you know, I think it's fair to say from Diana and from many of the scholars that, you know, Tolkien had a desire that Lewis would become Catholic. I think that's come out reasonably clear, and that never happened. And part of Lewis not inviting him to the wedding was that it wasn't going to happen because that made it impossible at that time, you know. And yet, what's that?
Oh, I was just going to say the wedding in general and the relationship associated.
And
joy, the divorce
is a big contrast to Catholic ideals, right?
Yeah,
so that created a barrier.
Yeah, and it's clearly something that you could see many other relationships going, fine, I'm done with you. And it's not. And they stay with it. And you know, the hope is there. The hope for change is there, but the change isn't going to happen the way you'd hoped. Now that sounds like something that Jock beats me on all the time. He just wishes I wouldn't do certain things I keep doing.
That's right.
And it's, you know, and I don't want to do them. But we're just very different, you know. Yep. And I appreciate him for struggling with that.
Someday he'll change.
Yeah, that's right. You know, but having that example for me has been you know, because sometimes you can go, gosh, you know, when is he going to give up on me? And I have that example from them is that they didn't give up on each other when they could have. You know, you could easily see how, yeah, you know, Tolkien's busy. One thing we haven't mentioned is that, you know, much like Lewis suffered with war injuries, well, so did Tolkien. Tolkien's trench fever, what we're told from the scholars, never really went away. He was kind of a sickly guy. He caught colds often. He wasn't there a lot. He couldn't come to every meeting because he didn't feel well. You see that difference of how you could easily see them going, you know what? You know, Tolkien's busy. I'm just going to do my thing. You know, and they didn't do that. They just stayed there together. That goes for many of the Inklings, you know, especially when other friendships came in, like Williams, who evidently, what Joe Rickey tells us, another wonderful one of the scholars, you know, Williams dropped in there like a bomb. And, you know, and he was super charismatic, and Tolkien evidently felt a little left out, is what we're told. But still, they still hung in there. It wasn't like, okay, I'm walking away, it's over, which seems
And
to be what happens more now.
and
It
and
kind
how
of
and we all can experience that. We've had friendships where there's two
Yep.
of us, then a third comes in, and the dynamic changes. But
Exactly.
they specifically talked about how I think it was Lewis talked about that I would have not had all of who Tolkien was if it wasn't for Williams coming in. Because when Williams came in, I saw different parts of Tolkien. It's part of that relation, part of who they are. So we love to bring that to. We're excited about bringing those things to the culture. That these don't break you up, they don't have to destroy you. They can grow you and
Yeah,
value them.
yeah, Lewis talks about first friends and second friends, which is really interesting. First friends are the ones, and I don't think he means them in some sort of hierarchical order, but it's like the one friend is the friend you get along with and you agree about everything. But then there's the second friend, which Owen Barfield would be the example, and Serena Higgins, another great voice in the Tolkien world that everyone should know and read her books. Describes how, uh, you know, Owen Barfield, Lewis says, he's read all the same books and he's got something exactly the opposite of I got from all of them. And yet they were great friends. They had what they called the Great War, and that war never really ends.
the way what made me think of as you were talking, what made me think of about like the hope and the expectations and not meeting them, but still the friendship happening and sort of the sadness and the internal struggles, whether that's the mental and the existential aspects or even the health aspects, makes me think of Frodo and Sam.
Yep.
And even after the scour, after Mount Doom and the scouring of the Shire, and after Frodo is trying to nuzzle into normal life again, right? And Sam is there, and Merry and Pippin are there to kind of help, and Gandalf shows up every once in a while, all that stuff. But in the end, Frodo has to make that decision to go to the Undying Lands because of the burden of everything. And of course, Sam, Merry, and Pippin don't want him to go, right? But ultimately, they understand. And what's hinted as that Sam will eventually go to the Undying Lands and spend time with Frodo, right? But it's sort of this hope and the expectations dashed with these characters who are on just two different areas, right? Frodo's this bourgeois, learned bachelor, and Sam is, this working class hobbit who eventually gets married and has a million children, right? And becomes like a politician or whatever. But I don't know. It seems like there is some poignant in that scene at the Grey Havens, and that is reflective of, or at least resonant with, C.S. Lewis and Tolkien's own friendship, and even how we experience friendship in life and dealing with those hard things.
Right. And I think John Garth, either it's John Garth or it's Stuart Lee, or for us, it's all a combination thereof. John Garth, Stuart Lee, and Colin Duriez all made the point that if you look at Tolkien and Lewis, they're little prigs. I mean, they grow up very sheltered in super smart and don't don't really connect. Certainly, Lewis doesn't connect with his friends at school. He hates his school. He's obviously abused at his schools. Tolkien does better because he does rugby and he has his group, the TCBS and things. But they also are not. It isn't until World War I that they really meet the Sams. They don't hang with those kids. Yeah, I mean they go to prestigious schools. Yeah, exactly. And I think that friendship, I think really affected, or their example of the bravest people they met, the most faithful people, the honorable people, weren't the officers, evidently.
They weren't the upper crust.
Yeah, it was the butcher, the baker, the ditch digger, who all, the guys in there doing the job, who then, Colin Duriez talks about, Lewis wanted to be an ordinary bloke. He wanted to be an ordinary man. And of course, Colin said, of course, he could never be because he was just too smart, but he wanted to be because he felt that they were more salt of the earth.
And in the
Yeah.
second half of his life, he worked at it. And
Yes, exactly.
He treated taxi drivers and common men equally, and Walter Hooper, his secretary towards the end of his life, brings out how Lewis did that purposely.
Even the homeless, yeah.
And it may be a cue that we may have missed, but Lewis has often, I believe it's Lewis who talks about one of the best ways you can figure out someone's personality is see how they treat people who are below them, how they treat their taxi cab drivers and how they treat their waiters and all that stuff. That's usually a really good insight on how they may treat you.
I love all these aspects that are in there. And I think when people, I'll encourage people, I'll link the trailer, just watch the trailer. I think to be honest, like, I think the spirit of the film comes out in the trailer, but I really hope that people who are listening will get a chance to go to these events that you have to just preview the film, and hopefully and support y'all so that the whole film can come out, because these aspects are so important and you guys capture it so amazingly. But as people start, looking at the trailer and they start looking into you guys, like, if there's one thing you want people to keep in mind or take away from the film, like, what would you say for you personally is like, this is the thing I want people to take away from the film, if that's even possible for you to?
Sure. Well, I have mine. I certainly have mine. Jock, why don't you go first?
Well, I mean, it really is that friendships are immensely valuable and they are a lot of work. And there's value in that work that you will not realize any other way to your life, and it really seems like in today's world that information is as valuable as it's ever been.
Turkey,
you go ahead, Ralph.
Or you want to land the plane?
No, I don't know where. I don't know what you're landing. Go ahead.
Well,
he doesn't know what you're flying.
One of us is going to end this. So, I'll go then. That's fine. For me, we began this journey. I think we all know, you should have friends you disagree with because then you're going to be, you'll learn things. And Kirk and I were in a class in, where was it? Near the Benedictine.
Atchison, Kansas. Benedictine College.
Kansas. And we brought that up to a high school class. And you can't imagine the dumbfounded look on their faces going, I have friends that don't agree with me? And conflict? Why? Why would I ever do that? And it was striking to us, like, the complete, that was so foreign. It was, they had dumb looks on their face. Well, through the process of not only having the relationship with the three of us, but the relationship with one of the participants who isn't involved anymore, that was difficult and hard, and we miss him, and it's sad and it's tragic. I'm still convinced now, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that if you don't have people that are friends that you can conflict with on a fundamental level, you will never reach the potential that you're capable of, because you'll constantly be blindsided by the same weaknesses that your friends agree with you will give you. You need that friend that doesn't see things the way you do to protect you from all your stupidities. And guess what? You're not going to like it because you're going to look stupid. But it's true. And Tolkien and Lewis are a fantastic example of that. And now I know it, and now I treasure it.
For me, other than what Jock and Ralph have both said, I would think I hope that Tolkien people come and go away saying, I need to look into this Lewis guy a little more. And the same thing with the Lewis people. Say, I didn't know that about Tolkien. there's more to him and where these stories come from than I thought. It's not just the stories themselves, but I want to learn more about where they came from and their lives, and how do I live my life or process my life with a fuller understanding of who they are and where they came from. So
Yeah,
beautiful.
and I think another great landing point on that is what Amy Lee said, one of our scholars, who said, and this applies to their works and certainly on Tolkien, is that she says there are truths that only a myth can best tell you.
and because they're a myth doesn't mean they're not true.
Yeah, it doesn't mean they're not true, but it's
Yeah.
just that sometimes the best way to tell a real truth is to be told in a story. And both Tolkien and Lewis, I think, really believe that. And that's why we go back and back to their works, because there's so many truths in there that are easily understood through the friendship between, Frodo and Sam, or through, Aslan, or these ideas that you just can't communicate in as well in any other way.
love it.
The other thing that relates to your question that we hope is that we feel a responsibility to take the written works of these scholars, their life results of their life's work, and we have the privilege and responsibility as filmmakers to translate these into a medium that this generation that isn't reading that much, your audience reads, no doubt about it. So partially we're writing beyond your audience to that audience before them that isn't reading. And we want to bring this work to them in such a way that maybe this spurs them into reading a little bit more, because your readers know there's a big difference in the experience between reading and watching the film.
Yeah.
Tolkien, Lord of the Rings,
Right.
Your audience would say, read the books. And we, even as filmmakers, want to say, read the books. And let's inspire you to do that. And we'll bring these scholars to you, and you can go deeper.
I think it really does do that. I really do. And so, as somebody who I came to Tolkien through the Rankin Bass Hobbit films and the Peter Jackson films, if it weren't for those movies, I would have never come to the books. And so if there's any creative piece of art and documentary or whatever it is, video game, I don't care, like that gets people to read Lewis and Tolkien and other members of the Inklings, like, yes, please. Yes, please.
Great.
Yeah. So for people so when people hear this, and get stoked, like, where can they get connected with Forged of Friendship online? And then how can they get involved with its fulfillment? And then also, tell me where people can find you guys online as well.
Sure. I mean,
Jock,
the website certainly is a great place to find us, which would be forgeoffriendship.com. And that'll bring them to the trailer and to Eastgate and all that we're doing. Eastgate Creative, which is the company, the nonprofit behind this project.
Or eastgatecreative.org, because we are a nonprofit. We specifically created this entity in order to be able to produce this documentary under a nonprofit status, which made it possible for us to work at the highest level at an efficient cost and not have to go get investors that we would then have to pay back once the funds came in from distribution. Our goal is
I was going to say, and also would be able to dictate how we said what we're saying.
Yeah, more importantly, yes.
Yes, yeah. Our goal is to be debt-free when we're finished. Right now, we've finished all the principal photography, 90% of the interviews. We're in post-production. That's why we talk about this as a preview program. It's a 1 hour of completed scenes, but eventually it'll be a 5-part series. And our original budget was like 1.5 million. Now, put that in perspective. The Ken Burns documentary, 6 episodes over 12 years. We're 5 episodes over almost 10 years. His is $30 million, ours 1.5, and I'll stack ours up against his any day. The quality is there because all these scholars in their relationship are giving to the nonprofit their time. And a lot of stories where we were able to put things together in such a way that we're staying at the highest quality because our 30 years of or 40 years of career relationships with our friends in this industry, they knowing what the topic is about, Lewis and Tolkien, and that we're a nonprofit, there's been a lot that have been given to us. So we're still finishing. We've raised about $600,000 to bring us to this point debt-free. We've got about $350,000 that we're going to raise to finish debt-free so that when we're completed, we can go to distribution, to Netflix, to Prime, and say, here's the project completed. Would you like it? Not, here's the project, we're almost done, give us money so that we can finish it. And they'd say, we'd be glad to, and this is what we'd like you to change. We're not going to be there. So when the distribution happens and that money comes in, it goes back into the nonprofit to begin funding the next group of projects that we have. And we've got about 9 projects we'd like to do. So eastgatecreative.org, they can participate by, there's a contact us. They can ask to be in our mailing list. We'll be notifying them where we're going on the tour, when we're going to be near them. They can come see us when benchmarks are happening, when it's getting ready for distribution. And they can also go to the donate button. If they want to join us in a regular giving to support the film, we're very open to having that happen. If there are some big money folks who would like to sponsor, become executive producers and kick in some of that final money, we have space for that as well.
Oh man, fantastic! People, I would say that
it's got to get out there.
The quality's amazing. It's got to get out there. It's obviously grassroots, and as somebody who's like a big punk rocker, DIY guy, like you guys are doing the punk rock thing, dude. Like you guys are, shaking your fist at corporate money. We're the creativity is our baby here. We're behind the creativity here.
Well, Nick,
Nick.
We've had a couple little large grants, but we've also had nuns in Minnesota who earn money dipping candles give us $50 a month for a period of time because they saw the trailer and they believe in what we're doing. It's crossing all those boundaries. And so we are open very much to people becoming part of us.
Yeah, I think it's worth it.
Support.
I think for me, I won't speak to any other things out there, but for those of you who have seen any other documentaries or YouTube video essays on Tolkien and Lewis, just from this preview alone, I can guarantee you that this is the best thing out there. It needs to go out, and I think that you'll enjoy it, first of all, if you're a Tolkien and Lewis fan, but I think it's something that will inspire and draw future generations to Tolkien and Lewis's lives and their works.
Right.
So,
I'm just going to pitch what I think is our strongest hand, which is the scholars. Okay. We have the combined knowledge of literally, I can't think of anybody in the field of Tolkien and Lewis that either isn't in this or doesn't know about it from the people who are in it. And those are the authorities. We don't write the script. They write the script because they know, and imagine that you could sit down with 45 of the most knowledgeable scholars on this subject and say, tell me the most important thing from all your studies. And you drop that into 5 hours. Well, that's what we've got. And that honors them. And we're just so privileged to be able to help them get that out. And to us, it's like, we feel like, hey, if we just show them doing their thing, then people will respond. And so that's why this tour has been so exciting, because it's just getting those scholars out there who've just given their lives to studying this stuff.
Yeah. Thank you guys for doing this. This has been fun just to hang out with you all again, but then also just to talk more about the nitty-gritty of the film and getting people connected. So thanks for taking the time to doing this, guys.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
unfortunately,
Connecting with you as
alcohol
well.
and tobacco was not involved enough, but that's okay.
Once the film's out and out there, maybe it's, celebration is in order.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Beer and all.
Yeah.
Well,
When we were in Nashville, we had the joy of being with a small group of men who meet weekly at the Nashville Cigar Shop. And so,
did you guys go to Smoker's Abbey?
no, we went to Nashville Cigar.
Oh, Nashville
That's the
Cigar.
name of the place. Yeah, and they have a private room up in the back, and so we had a screening up there. We brought our pipes,
we
and we
fugged up a room.
fugged up the room
That's right.
as
Just
Lewis
like Tolkien and just like Lewis' brother would do.
and his brother would do. Yeah.
Yeah.